On today's video, we're going to do a combination collecting slash reading guide slash this is all the Guardians of the Galaxy comics I own. Let's try out a new format.
It's morphin' time!
Hello, this is Soundout here, and on today's video, we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy comics. There's an upcoming relaunch happening with the Guardians and the Marvel Cosmic in general with the Imperial event that Jonathan Hickman is doing. So I thought, let's get a guide out there prior to that, so if you want to read up on the history of the Guardians of the Galaxy, you have a chance to do so. This is not going to be a reading guide in the you're going to get precise issue number to issue number. I'm mostly going to go through my collection of Guardians comics and the trade paperbacks, like what you see before you, and kind of explain how some of the order goes in, what I think is more important than some other things, and just kind of give you general thoughts. This is a different type of video, so I'd appreciate any feedback you'd leave in the comments down below. Hit the like button, subscribe while you're down there if you haven't already. If you are looking for more detailed like reading guides by issue, there's a lot of great websites out there like Crushing Crisis or Comic Herald that have more of that precision stuff. This is going to be more about like, the series themselves and kind of giving you an overview to pursue your own research further, while also looking at my collection of Guardians of the Galaxy in comic form. So let's take a look at the Guardians of the Galaxy comics in the order that they take place in. So let's begin with the classic era of Guardians of the Galaxy with the original Guardians team. So before the movies existed, before we had anything related to like the modern version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, your Star-Lords, your Rockets, your Groots, we had the Guardians of the Galaxy as they appeared in the year 3000. So the whole idea behind this team is that it's the 31st century, they're trying to save Earth from the Badoon, and there's members like Yondu, Vance Astro, Martin X, Starhawk, and Charlie 17. That's kind of like your, Charlie 27, had Mickey 17 on the brain. This is like the beginning of the concept of the Guardians of the Galaxy. This epic collection, Volume 1, Earth Shall Overcome, it's pretty cool. It's the 1969 to 1977 volume, because they didn't have an ongoing title, so they're kind of just going through other titles, backups in some stories, crossovers here and there. But a lot of these characters are established here. And if you're like a fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy video game, for example, and know who like Nikki Gold is, that's where her stories come from, is from this comic. And as you kind of go through like the history of the Guardians, these original Guardians are referenced a lot. Volume 2 of the Epic Collections has more crossovers with like the Avengers and some more appearances before leading into the Guardians' own ongoing series itself. The thing is, I haven't read the entire original Guardians run from the 90s or all the previous stuff. I've only got these 2 Epic Collections, that's all they printed so far, but there's a third one on the way, which is really, really nice. And I think, it's probably going to take, I think, 4 or 5 volumes to get the original Guardians run completely collected for the first time, but it'll be really, really awesome when that's complete. And that's kind of like your origin of the idea of the team name, Guardians of the Galaxy. So the next stage in Guardians history would be the Annihilation event. This was a reintroduction to the Marvel Cosmic Universe, post-Marvel restructuring. It took them a few years to kind of get their company back together after their bankruptcy. And the Annihilation event was essentially their way to bring back a lot of the cosmic characters that were left behind, like Drax the Destroyer, Silver Surfer, the Nova Corps, and it also started to introduce some of the characters you'd be familiar with from Guardians of the Galaxy. Reintroducing Groot, Rocket, Gamora, reintroducing a new version of Star-Lord. And that's kind of like the origins of the Guardians in the Annihilation event. Now, in my collection, I've got book 1, 2, and 3, which covers all of Annihilation. They are reprinting Annihilation now in Epic Collection, where there's going to be 2 volumes to cover the entire event. If you've never had a chance to check this storyline out and you're interested in Cosmic Marvel, there's really no better place to start. It is a little awkward, like if you're reading it digitally, it starts with Drax the Destroyer 1-4 here, and then Annihilation Prologue and Annihilation Nova 1-4. Book 2 is Annihilation Super Skrull 1-4, Annihilation Ronan 1-4, and Annihilation Silver Surfer 1-4. And then book 3 is the actual 6-issue Annihilation event, plus the Heralds of Galactus 2-issue series and the Nova Corps file issue. And this is just a fantastic way to get into the cosmic side of Marvel Comics. It brings in familiar elements, it brings in new elements, it has great storytelling and artwork. It's a really great entry point into like the overall cosmic side of Marvel. And so this event, while it doesn't directly like affect the Guardians of the Galaxy, it led into a sequel, which was Annihilation Conquest. Phyla-Vell as Quasar here being prominent on the cover. You might recognize her from that recent Marvel beat-em-up game that was announced at a Nintendo Switch Direct. I'm really excited for that game because she's in it, and this is one of my favorite characters. But what you'll see here is you'll see Star-Lord has started to appear, and you start to see other characters that'll form the Guardians of the Galaxy. And in fact, throughout the pages of Annihilation Conquest, the Guardians of the Galaxy have been formed. And this initial lineup is a little awkward and weird if you're used to like the movie lineup, but this is kind of like where it all began as a concept. So with Annihilation Conquest, it's, there's a prologue, there's a Quasar 4-issue miniseries, a Star-Lord 4-issue miniseries, and an Annihilation Saga issue. And then Book 2 of Conquest, which is a little thicker, has Conquest, the Wraith 4-issue miniseries, issues 4 to 7 of Nova, and Annihilation Conquest 1 to 6. I'm not including any Nova in this kind of like guide because we're kind of focusing on the Guardians of the Galaxy. And Nova himself, Richard Rider, very much a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy many times, but he has so many of his own solo adventures. It's kind of his own thing. They haven't announced any Annihilation Conquest like epic collections yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if those are coming in the future. But if you haven't read, Cosmic Marvel, there's no better place to start than Annihilation and Annihilation Conquest. I really particularly love Conquest. There's a great twist villain there. And I think this is like such a great entry point. But by the end of Conquest, we had a new Guardians of the Galaxy that was completely separate from the original, but now is a little bit kind of more mischievous, a little bit more ragtag, and a lot more fun. So now we get to the first Guardians of the Galaxy ongoing of the modern era, which is been nicely recollected into these two epic collections. Somebody's got to do it in War of Kings. These are modern era epic collections or Guardians. This is one of the most well-regarded runs on the characters. There is a lot of great creative talent behind the series. This does contain the Annihilation Conquest Star-Lord miniseries, so it kind of gives you that lead-in to the idea of the Guardians. And then Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning did a great run on the characters with a variety of great artists. So the only frustration I feel with this first epic collection is that it's pretty straightforward, having issues 1 to 12 of the main series plus the Annihilation Conquest Star-Lord miniseries. And that Annihilation Conquest miniseries is kind of a lead-in to the Guardians of the Galaxy in a way. But there's a big jump, and there's a lot of events you're going to miss, and there's not a text recap. So I would recommend reading Annihilation and Annihilation Conquest prior to reading this. It is nice that those 4 issues are collected because those are the most Guardian-centric issues, but, you kind of need to see the context of everything going into it. But other than that, it's a pretty straight read for those 12 issues of Guardians of the Galaxy. And part of this also includes bringing in some of the characters from the original Guardians team from the year 3000 in new stylish looks. So it's pretty cool, though you don't feel like you need to read the original Guardians to get the modern Guardians. They're a supporting cast. Now, when it comes to Volume 2, it's a little more awkward because Volume 2 contains Guardians 13 through 25 as well as the Thanos Imperative crossover, and that miniseries is kind of like an epilogue to the entire Guardians run here. But during this Guardians run, it overlaps with the War of Kings event, which is very X-Men and Inhumans focused. And there's also the Realm of Kings. A lot of this is kind of the next chapter in the Marvel Cosmic Saga after Annihilation, but it can be kind of a tricky read because the Guardians issues do reference events going on over here, and War of Kings, Realm of Kings is a big old crossover event. But if you're trying to read just Guardians, the epic collections for Volume 2 have done what Volume 1 didn't, and provided text recaps called Previously in War of Kings. So while it doesn't give you, the full story per se, you're actually getting like what happened between issues, which is kind of a nice way to sort of catch up and understand the context of what's going on, because all of this is happening at the same time of War of Kings and Realm of Kings. And then Thanos Imperative works as an epilogue to not just this Guardian series, but the ongoing Nova series at the same time. So I was going to do a reading recommendation on how to handle this part of the story. I would say you could go and look up a guide and intersplice issues back and forth between this and the X-Men stuff and the War of Kings event itself. But I do recommend that you can read 1 through 12. Then when you go to issue 13, go just read the entirety of War of Kings, whether you include the prelude or not, like at least the War of Kings 6-issue miniseries, so you got context there, maybe even Realm of Kings as well, and then go read 13 through 25 and then the rest of the Thanos Imperative after that, because that'll be the smoother reading experience for all of this. And if we're keeping it Guardians focused, you don't really need to worry about Road to War of Kings or Realm of Kings as much as the main 6-issue War of Kings series. So that way you just have context for these storylines where the Guardians are involved, but they're not like super heavily involved. And I think that kind of works out for most of their tie-ins, makes it an easier read on their side. So following the Thanos imperative, the Guardians kind of go away for a bit. I'm not going to say why, spoilers. But in the Annihilators and Annihilators Earthfall series, they kind of continued the Marvel Cosmic Saga. The important part here is that the Annihilator series has backups with Rocket Raccoon and Groot in them. And that kind of shows like what they were doing after the Thanos imperative. And it's more comedy focused, but it's kind of some of the first solo Rocket and Groot stories that we gotten in the modern era. And so what I'm hoping for is when the next Guardians of the Galaxy modern epic comes out, they started off with the Rocket and Groot, unless they're going to do a Rocket and Groot epic collection, which they could. They could get at least like 3 volumes out of that. But this is kind of like an epilogue to that era of Marvel Cosmic before everything starts over once again with the next era of Guardians of the Galaxy. So now we reached the Brian Michael Bendis era of Guardians of the Galaxy. We're going to look at the first era prior to Secret Wars first. There was an 8-issue arc of Avengers Assemble that reintroduced the Guardians of the Galaxy. I kind of find them to be more cameo appearances. That story's mostly Avengers focused, but it was where the Guardians came back. And they were back and they were in business. And throughout that storyline, eventually Iron Man chose to join the Avengers. Mostly because the Synergy Machine said, hey, let's put Iron Man in there to give him a boost. But this run is kind of your reinvention of the Guardians. It goes for a different style and tone, and it's kind of keying them up for their appearance in the upcoming movie. Or the then upcoming movie, I should say. So when it comes to reading this, it's pretty straightforward for the most part. This first volume, I've got kind of a weird special edition of it. This first volume is only issues 1 to 3 and a 0.1 issue that's kind of going into some Star-Lord backstory stuff that has been retconned. There are some changes from the Abnett and Lanning era that do get explained eventually. They did introduce the character of Angela, and she has her own solo spin-off books, but they kind of more fit into the Thor circle of things than the Guardian circle, so we're not going to worry about those in this video. This was issues 4 to 10. Then we had a crossover with Bendis' other book at the time, All New X-Men, which was the trial of Jean Grey, which is Guardians 11 to 13 and All New X-Men 22 to 24. Pretty straightforward crossover. The nice part is they put out a trade that could kind of go with, either collection, which I kind of like the way that Marvel does crossovers like that. They're like, oh, hey, here's a standalone crossover that's just these 2 books. Let's give it its own standalone trade. Guardians Disassembled here is the 3rd volume, which is issues 14 through 17 plus the free comic book day issue. And then they also threw in a couple bonus issues in the back, like the first appearance of Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel and the first appearance of Flash Thompson as Venom, because they joined the team during this volume. So it's kind of like a, hey, here's who these 2 characters are, which is pretty cool. Then volume 4, Original Sin, is a tie-in to the Original Sin event where characters have to kind of like own up to some of their things, but it kind of explains what happened between the Abnett Lanning and the Bendis era. This is issues 18 through 23. And then Through the Looking Glass is volume 5, kind of ending this original run, issues 24 to 27 in the 2015 annual, and this leads right into Secret Wars. Now, this is part of an event, though, which is called the Black Vortex. And the Black Vortex is essentially, it's an object, and this object lets people see different versions of themselves, and people come out of it on different occasions. So when it comes to the Black Vortex crossover event, a lot of reading guides will have you read it like how this trade is structured, where it's like, here's every issue that ties into Black Vortex. But they are mostly kind of one-shot stories focusing on different characters. So if you want to read the entire Black Vortex event, you can, but if you are just following what was included in the trades, or you're just reading the issue straight on Guardians, you should be mostly okay to follow the story, because the setup of the Black Vortex is more important so much than reading every single issue. And then going into all the spin-offs of the era, it was in movie season, so they were really pumping stuff out. There's a collection called Best Story Ever that contains Guardians' Best Story Ever, Guardians Tomorrow's Avengers, a free comic book day Rocket Raccoon issue, and Guardians of the Galaxy Galaxy's Most Wanted, as well as a bunch of like extra older stuff in the back, including like stories from like Thor and the Logan's Run comic that features some of these characters at earlier points in Marvel history. There's also a one-shot called Dream On that for some reason has only been collected in this digest-sized Marvelverse Guardians trade, which I picked up simply because it's the only way to get that one-shot. We got Guardians Team Up, which was a bit of a spin-off series. This was something that Marvel was doing a lot. But basically, there is a spin-off book. It's called Guardians Team Up. One of these issues ties into Black Vortex, but pretty much they are kind of one-shot stories of the Guardians teaming up with the other characters. There was also Tales of the Pet Avengers featuring Rocket, which is included here. Guardians Team Up ran 10 issues in total. Rocket and Groot both got spin-off series. This collection actually collects all of the 2014 Rocket and then the 2014 Groot series. So Rocket had 11 issues. Scotty Young was the lead creative on this. And it's kind of like fun misadventures. It's hard to place in like the timeline of things. And then the Groot series, which was really good as well, was a nice introspective Groot series. It kind of him going off on his own adventure. These are both comics that are fun to read. They're definitely enjoyable. They're not like super necessity to the main story. Something that's a little more tied in, though, is Legendary Star-Lord by Sam Humphries. He did this series to kind of give Star-Lord his own book, basically. And a lot of this goes into his backstory and some of his like character stuff and his family stuff. And it's actually what kind of leads to and sets up the Black Vortex event. So if you're reading Legendary Star-Lord, I feel like Black Vortex is more important than if you're just reading Guardians. We had 12 issues of this prior to Secret Wars. It also involves a storyline where he is in a relationship with Kitty Pryde from the X-Men, which is, honestly, it's a lot cuter than it sounds. The original Guardians also returned in this era. We have Guardians 3000, which was a series spinning out of the main Guardians. Guardians issue 14 kind of leads into this. The original Guardians returned. Now, their run lasted, I think it was 8 issues. And so for whatever reason, they decided to put 5 issues in Trade 1, and then Trade 2 has the last 3 issues, 6 to 8, as well as the 4-issue Korvac Saga Secret Wars tie-in, because this just kind of ran right into each other. So if you're ever looking for the trades on these, it's like Guardians 3000 Volume 1, but what about Volume 2? And Volume 2 is actually the Korvac Saga War Zones tie-in. So if you're missing those old original Guardians, they're back in business for that. And then, of course, Secret Wars was kind of Marvel's like relaunch point where everything relaunched, and so we have a new era to look at after that. Alright, so during the Secret Wars event, the Guardians of the Galaxy team was in a series called Guardians of Nowhere. For context in Secret Wars, Dr. Doom remade the multiverse into a single world known as Battle World, and during that there was a bunch of tie-ins, and so all the books went on hold because, you know, the universes have been smashed together, and so it was showing peeks into that universe, which was the Secret Wars tie-ins. There was Battle World and War Zones. Battle World was kind of like your key main stuff that was affecting the main Secret Wars book, whereas War Zones were kind of like little pockets into things. And so this is basically showing like what do the Guardians world look like on Battle World, and that was Guardians of Nowhere. Then you have Star-Lord and Kitty Pryde, which is, of course, showing what happened with Star-Lord and Kitty Pryde. And this kind of connects to the overall like Sam Humphries Star-Lord run. The interesting part is this is only a 3-issue series, so they slapped in like the Black Vortex finale issue in the back of this as well, which kind of goes well if you're only collecting the Star-Lord trades. Then when Secret Wars was over, everything came back and started fresh, and so Bendis was still writing Guardians. This was a new series. I know sometimes it's referred to as Guardians of the Galaxy New Guard when you look for it, but it's the 2015 series, and then there's a ton of spinoffs, and so follow me here. This is, I think, the most straightforward order. So Volume 1 is 5 issues. So that's where you kind of start. Yes, the Thing has joined the team now because the Fantastic Four are no more after Secret Wars. And so Ben Grimm kind of gets off Earth and comes and joins the Guardians. And Kitty Pryde is now Star-Lord for reasons that are told in the story. There was an 8-issue series called Guardians of Infinity, and it was collected in 2 trades, Guardians of Infinity and Tales of the Cosmos, because every issue of Guardians of Infinity had 2 stories to them. So basically, this is all the A stories, this is all the B stories. And so that's kind of a series that kind of goes in between, kind of not really, it doesn't really take place during this point, but it's a good place to read it in reading order. The next volume, Wanted, this is issues 6 through 10. This is like the next story arc. You know, after you've done this, kind of pop over back to Star-Lord. So an interesting thing Marvel did with the trade dress is while everything had gone to the style we're used to now with the image box at the bottom and the black text, but then the colors down here, they actually did keep the Star-Lord branding as the pre-Secret Wars with the red text and the smaller image because it was still Sam Humphries writing Star-Lord. So volumes 3 and 4. This was only an 8-issue series in 2015 that was renumbered, but the volumes are continuing. This is essentially just kind of the 2 different storylines here. The first volume is your origin of Star-Lord in full. We had gotten parts of it before, but this is like him meeting Yondu because they kind of wanted to bring some of the movie elements over. And yeah, they introduced a new Yondu. This is not the same Yondu from the original Guardians team. This is kind of Star-Lord's new origin. And then Volume 2, which is only issues 6 through 8, is kind of Peter and Kitty kind of dealing with the Star-Lord mantle and kind of what it all means. And, kind of like how their thing is sort of ending. Rocket and Groot, this is just, it's more kind of like what we had seen with the Rocket series, less of the Groot series, but it's kind of like a fun comic. There's a lot of cool stuff in it, a lot of great artwork. This ran for 10 issues. The interesting part is that, yes, it has a Civil War II tie-in, because that's what happens to every comic when Civil War II came out, whether or not they should have been involved at all. Drax got a solo series as well, written by CM Punk. This lasted 11 issues, across 2 volumes. Coming back to the main series, Civil War II, yeah, it interrupted every single Marvel book. Every Marvel book had a tie-in. Spider-Man 2099 was in a different time period and couldn't escape it. Everybody had to tie into Civil War II. And so what happens is that the Guardians get a call from Carol Danvers, and they decide, well, she's one of our teammates. We should go help her out. And in the process, they lose their ship. And that's where we get to Grounded, which is the final arc of Bendis' run on Guardians. And I really love the Grounded arc, because basically the Guardians are stranded on Earth. And so, like, their Earth-based teammates, Venom thing, they kind of just are like, let's just leave. We're just going to stay on Earth. But the other Guardians are like, now we're stranded. How do we get off this planet? How do we deal with this? In this volume here, which is issues 15 through 19, you get the stories for, like, Gamora, for Drax, for Groot. And then in their own series, you get Rocket and Star-Lord's stories. And so Rocket Grounded, which is the Rocket 2016 series, he's basically like a menace on Earth, and he is trying to run from Kraven the Hunter, because Kraven the Hunter's like, oh, talking raccoon, that sounds like unique game to me. And then Star-Lord Grounded is basically, it's the 2016 Star-Lord series, and this is Peter Quill learning to be an actual adult and having responsibilities and trying to, like, make something of a life on Earth, and he gets to team up with Daredevil and fight Black Cat and, like, all kinds of cool stuff. So I really like this one. This was a 6-issue series with an annual. And it was Chip Zdarsky that wrote this, which was fun, because this was before Chip Zdarsky wrote Daredevil, and then Chris Anka does the artwork. I really do like the way that these 3, like, trade paperbacks go together. The Grounded story arc for the Guardians really puts them in a different setting than they'd ever had before, and it provided some really cool storytelling. Going on, other things in this era, the Mother Entropy 5-issue, I guess kind of an event. It's more of a mini-series. It's the Guardians fighting this thing called Mother Entropy. It's kind of a fun little side story. It's not super necessity. Gamora got a 5-issue series that's going into her backstory, and this was done by Nicole Perlman, who was a co-writer on the first Guardians movie, and so it kind of gives a nice insight into Gamora's childhood and her rise to who she is. And then we got another Rocket series in 2017 called The Blue River Score. This is by Al Ewing, who would later write Guardians, and this is a fantastic, like, caper story with Rocket and his crew, and it's really fun to go into all that. This era can be a little messy, as you can imagine, from all the things I just showed you. I will say, the main Guardians book is like the important parts, but I do really love the Grounded arc a whole lot. Like, if you read Guardians Grounded, and then you go read the Rocket and Star-Lord arcs for those, pretty great stuff. So luckily this next era is a lot less complicated. We have the Jerry Duggan run, the all-new Guardians of the Galaxy. This was sort of during Marvel Legacy. This was a bit of an awkward series to read digitally or in singles. Let me explain. So if you look at the contents here, you get Guardians 1 to 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, plus the free Comic Book Day special. And then Volume 2 is issues 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 12. So basically what they ended up doing was that for this run, for whatever reason, issue 1 to 2 is like a 2-part story, but then issue 4 is the next part of the story, whereas issue 2 was like an interlude focusing on a Guardian. So that's kind of the fun part, right? See, issue 3 is about Gamora. So issue 1 and 2 starts the series. Then we have a Gamora interlude. Then you have an issue. Then you have an interlude. Then you have an issue. Then you have an interlude. That's really awkward for a lot of reasons when you're reading it. If you're reading it in singles, you're just going to be like, oh, every other issue is an interlude. For trade, I think it was smart. They basically put all of the main story together here and then all of the interludes here. I will also add that this has probably my favorite single issue of Guardians of the Galaxy, like, ever. which is the Star-Lord interlude issue, which is issue 5. It's so much fun because this is basically it's an issue. The whole structure is kind of explaining how Star-Lord has cassette tapes, which of course is like a thing that was brought up in the MCU that they brought to the comics. But it's a great introspective thing into Peter Quill as a person, and like, why does he go out of his way to have cassette tapes and stuff? And there's like a great line. There's a great thing of like everybody's making fun of him having like physical media, and he's like, no, it's great having physical media. I'm holding a physical comic while talking about this, and that's the important part. But, you know, basically it's like his kind of like love of having things physical and like the way he like, you know, draws things on the cassettes and stuff. It's really great. Love that stuff. The run does have another complication when you're reading it in singles. It suddenly is Guardians of the Galaxy 146 to 150. You're like, wait, didn't we leave off at 12? Yeah, it's because Marvel is doing this legacy numbering thing where they put all the numbers back as to how they would have been if they never restarted them. I don't like that because it's confusing when you're reading it, especially if you're reading it like digitally on Marvel Unlimited. You're like, oh, I go from 12 to 146. You're not. It's still the 13th issue of the series. It's just they went back to the old numbering. Now, this is called Infinity Quest because it leads into the next big event. There also was a 5-issue Groot series called I Am Groot. It's like Groot as a kid. It's baby Groot. It's adorable. It's fun. It's not necessary, but it's fun. Infinity Wars. This is seemingly, it looks like, oh, this is like your Infinity War movie tie-in comic, right? Like we got a movie about the Infinity Stones. Let's do a book on the Infinity Stones, which is basically what its inception is. But I say this with all sincerity. This is an essential reading for Guardians of the Galaxy because Jerry Duggan wrote the series and he went from Guardians into this. This is the finale to Jerry Duggan's Guardians. Now, this hardcover contains the Infinity Countdown Prime issue, the 5-issue series, plus the Adam Warlock, plus Infinity Wars and Fallen Guardian and Infinity, all the stuff of the main story. So if you're reading this, you know, you're looking up it on digital and stuff, you know, look up a reading guide, obviously. You don't need to read necessarily every single tie-in to it, but what's contained in this book is going to be what you're looking for. And then following that, Donny Cates had a short run on Guardians. This is Volume 1's The Final Gauntlet with issues 1 to 6, and Faithless, which is issue 7 to 12, and the annual. This is, I think it's just known as Guardians of the Galaxy 2019. You know, it's following up what happened at the end of Infinity Wars and leading into it. So it's one of those things, if you jump from reading the end of All New Guardians of the Galaxy straight into the Cates run, you're going to miss a whole chunk of the story because it happens in Infinity Wars. So, again, really recommend reading Infinity Wars. But after that series, the only real tie-in here is that there was this thing called Prodigal Son. It was like a 3-issue like annual event, and it just was Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, and Guardians. And so there's a Guardians issue here, and the Guardians are involved. This takes place around the Cates run during it, basically. But yeah, that's a lot more straightforward of an era than the previous one. The next one's even shorter. And that would be the Al Ewing run on Guardians. This is a fantastic series. This was in 2020. This did not run long enough. This was the first Guardians comic I was picking up monthly. Absolutely love this series. It picks up from where Cates left off. I did forget to mention the Cates series does have a collected like thick trade, and the Ewing series does have these 3 trades collected into a collection with his Rocket series, which is great if you don't have the individual trades. But this series, it really kind of gets the Guardians. It really moves Star-Lord's character forward in a way he hadn't before. It's really terrific, and it really focuses in and centers on the characters before kind of going crazy with it in the 3rd volume by expanding the roster to include pretty much everybody in Marvel Cosmic and even throwing in Dr. Doom on the team. It's stellar. It only lasted 18 issues. I am so mad. This could have gone on for 50, 60 issues. I could have read this forever because Ewing really just gets Marvel Cosmic, and he gets, you know, he knows how to do a shakeup, like throw Dr. Doom on the team. And the stuff he did with Star-Lord in this is absolutely legendary, and it's fantastic. Cannot recommend this run enough. You can even start with this run and then read more Guardians after, I would even say. Now, during this, there was a mini event called Last Annihilation. And so for whatever reason, in both the individual trades and the Al Ewing Guardians trade, they don't include all of Last Annihilation. This is a separate trade, which has issues 16 through 18 of Guardians, which is over here. You get Cable Reloaded, Wiccan and Hulkling, Sword, issue 7, and Last Annihilation Wakanda. Most of those are written by Al Ewing, because he was also writing Sword at the time, which was a X-Men book. And basically, Last Annihilation features Dormammu taking over Ego, the Living Planet. And the idea is to kind of do an Annihilation-style event, meant to be kind of like the last Annihilation-style event, and it works there. So basically, Guardians, Sword, and Cable, all written by Al Ewing, but then Hulkling and Wiccan and then Wakanda are written by Anthony Olivier and Evan Narcisse. I love those two tie-ins so much, and the only way to get those two tie-ins is in this trade. So I really like it. You don't need to read all the tie-ins to totally get the Last Annihilation story. It plays perfectly fine with just Guardians 16 through 18. But it would have been nice if they'd included those in the Al Ewing collection just to kind of round the story out a little bit. But yeah, if you're wanting the full Last Annihilation story, this is the collection to get. But yeah, you're gonna get the main story beats in the main Guardians trades. But it's pretty epic having a nice event version of it. They did finally handle the two Yondu situations with Yondu, my two Yondus. Basically, it's got Yondu from the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and then the new Yondu that was introduced as part of the Star-Lord back series. And basically, yeah, it's kind of explaining why are the two Yondus, how are they connected, what can they learn about each other, and that sort of thing. It's a fun little run. There also was a Nebula comic that got canceled. It only got 2 issues. It never made it to trade print. It was canceled due to all the things going on in 2020. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then the most recent Guardians comic, at least until the relaunch, is the Jackson Lanzing and Colin Kelly run. And I'm just going to make sure I didn't flip their names because I could easily do that. I've done it before and I could do it again. Yeah, Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing. Did I say it the other way? I don't remember. But anyways, this was kind of like a bold reinvention. It came out, what was this? This was the 2023 series. So it came out around the time of Guardians Volume 3. Had this kind of like space western look to it. Love the way it looks. This is one of those comics that reading it monthly was a bit of a drag because it's sort of like you get to the end of Volume 2, which, this only ran 10 issues and an annual. You get to the end of Volume 2 and I got, oh, I get it now. I get what they're doing now. But as a Guardians fan, I wasn't quite happy reading it monthly. Terrific artwork, though. Absolutely terrific artwork. Who was it? Kev Walker, I think, was the main artist on this book. Really great stuff. Art-wise, not my favorite run. I still miss the Ewing run. But we haven't had a Guardians comic since, which has been a big bummer. Like, the movie made a bunch of money, and then they're like, oh, we're just going to bench them. But, there's a relaunch coming with Hickman's Imperial and all that. There also was a Groot series. This is another Groot series where he is a baby, but it kind of explains what happened on Planet X and why he had to leave and what happened to it. And he also encounters Mar-Vell. So it's a really nice flashback series. It's really fun. I really, really enjoyed this. Dan Abnett returned to do this, and he, of course, written a bunch of the Guardian stuff we looked at so far. And then the last thing is Old Man Quill. This is in an alternate universe. It's called the Wastelanders universe. It's the Old Man Logan universe, basically. And this is the story of Peter Quill in that universe and him trying to survive. I'm not like a big fan of the concept of like Old Man Logan and how they kept spinning it off, but I gotta say the Old Man Hawkeye was pretty great, and the Old Man Quill is probably my favorite. And it may be just because I am a big Star-Lord fan, but I thought like there's a real heart-wrenching twist in this that I thought made this work incredibly well. And there was a one-shot in the Wastelanders series. There was like a Wastelanders Star-Lord that kind of works as like a bit of an epilogue. I just thought it was really terrific, and I thought it handled the concept well, and it did something new and interesting with it. But yeah, that's kind of its own universe, while the rest of it is mainline. Yeah, this era of Guardians, the only bummer is that it didn't last any longer than it did. So that pretty much does it for my Guardians of the Galaxy comic collection / reading guide. I know it's not like a precise, like, read this issue on this issue. There's a lot of great resources out there. There's a lot of great websites that you can find to give yourself reading guides. But I kind of wanted to kind of show, like, how collecting it has gone. And that was kind of the idea here. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, obviously, because I have every modern appearance of the team in trade. And I have there's a couple more one-shots I didn't even mention because they never got collected. I have them, but they're just not collected. I love this team. I hope you check out some Guardians of the Galaxy, especially with them being relaunched soon. There's a lot of good things to check out in this world. And speaking of that, if you want to check out more videos on the channel, as well as hit subscribe and the notification bell, as well as the like button, really greatly appreciate that. If you want to continue the conversation, join our Discord server in the link below. You can also join as a channel member to help support the channel directly, and there's perks like early access to videos and member-exclusive live streams. Let's give some special shout-outs to our channel members. Special shout-out to all of our channel members, including Captain Tier, Spin-54, Toma K, MasterBin95, Forever1000, Super Shaddix Boom, Mr. Smelly Potato, Matcha's Dent, Greg Harris, EasyToast727, Common Jojo, Cam Strickland, Nerdy Texas Accountant, Shinji, K Breezy, Esper, Mars the Star Droid, Silverbricks, Travis's Media Madness, Gokai Gamer, Josh Frisch, Muhammad Faiz Daniel, Brenton Yadden, Stephen Hinojosa, Jamie's World, Cameron Meter, and Taylor Black. Thank you all for your support, both channel members and viewers alike. If you so wish, I'm on social media at Blue Sky and Discord at Soundout12. You can also find my wonderful graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643. And you can find Hero Club at HeroClub.com for comic reviews and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.